Hello and welcome back to Flute Tip of the Week. Very often, especially in the modern world, we have things that happen out of our control that fill up our time in the day. Or, for a lot of people, there can be 9-to-5 jobs or school to worry about. Basically, what I'm getting at is we don't always have an unlimited amount of time to practice in the day. Sometimes we're stuck with just 30 minutes or, if you're lucky, an hour. And when you don't have a general idea of how to structure that practice, you run the risk of it not being productive and, if anything, being detrimental and not allowing you to further develop. Because if you practice for just 30 minutes a day without any real structure to your work, in 2 weeks you're still going to be playing at the same level you started at. So today, I am going to be talking about schedules that you can use for when you have 30 minutes or an hour to practice. Have a timing model in place for days where you only have 30 minutes to an hour to practice. First off, let's start with a 30-minute model. For the first 10 minutes of this half-hour segment, you're going to be doing warm-up exercises. This includes long tones and slow scales with different rhythmic patterns within each note so that you can warm up your tongue. So you can be doing the scale all slurred, and if you're doing it at a beat of 60, then do it as eighth notes, quavers, then semi-quavers, 16th notes, and if you're feeling really energized and you feel like your articulation is up for it, do sextuplet semiquavers. For the next 10 to 15 minutes, work on technique. This includes different scale and arpeggio patterns, which, as I always say, are extremely important for understanding how the structure of the pieces you're working on is built, as well as practicing studies that you're working on at the moment. My absolute favorite book to work on scale and arpeggio patterns is Moyse's Gamme et Arpège. It is basically every single scale pattern that you could possibly want to work on. And then for your last 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to work on your repertoire. And instead of just doing run-throughs of it, you're going to be doing segment practice. Only working on sections that you know you've been having difficulty with so that the next time you do have time to do a run-through of the piece, you aren't worrying about this one little part that is driving you nuts. Okay, so that is our half-hour model. Now, let's look at our 1-hour schedule. This time, for the first 15 minutes, you'll be doing warm-ups, such as long tones, octave leaps to help with your mobility of your embouchure, as well as transposing melodies. Now, I say the transposing melodies because this will really help you turn your brain on. It'll get you aware of what you're doing at the same time as having character and different colors to work with. And then you'll do 10 minutes on articulation. And for this, I do highly recommend my articulation exercise from early on. The link to that video will be in the description for this one. Next, for the next 15 to 20 minutes, work on your technique. This gives you more time so that instead of only doing scale work, and when I say different scale patterns, I mean doing them in thirds, fifths, doing modes as well as the regular major and minor scales. And I highly recommend using a good 5 to 10 minutes of this technique time to work on your sight reading. So just going through your study book, giving yourself 30 seconds to take a look at the piece, and then playing it all the way through without stopping. And sometimes this is really fun, so for 5 to 10 minutes of your technique practice, just keep on reading through some studies and see how your scale and arpeggio pattern practice translates to how quickly you can learn new repertoire. And then finally, for the last 15 to 20 minutes of your hour practice time, work on your repertoire. As always, start off with your segment practice, but I would suggest spending maybe only 5 minutes at first on the segments and then doing a run-through of the movements you've been working on most. What this allows you to do is see how you're developing in the context of the piece those particular segments, as well as giving you the time to work on the interpretation, making sure you are paying close attention to the directions that are written in by the composer, as well as seeing if you're able to make a really large canvas of colors, dynamics, and depending on what kind of piece it is, going into the different characters that seem more prevalent at different times. And once you've done that, if you still have time in this section, then finish off with doing more of the segment practice and going through and making notes on your page of where you think you need to focus on next, so that if you only have a half hour next time you practice, you know exactly which parts still need work. So again, that tip was have a scheduling model in place for days you only have a half hour or an hour to practice. I hope you find this week's tip helpful. I know that especially for people who are doing flute as a hobby instead of as their main focus, then it can be really difficult to schedule practice time in. And so I hope that these different schedules will help you guys out. See you all next week. Flute happy, schedule happy, and always make sure you've got at least a little bit of practice time. This is Marie.
Hello.
I'm gonna go watch her play football and be awesome at it.
Definitely.
Winning!